Welcome to Separate Together, a podcast exploring what happens when we change not just how families separate, but how we think about legal separations altogether. Hosted by me, practicing family lawyer Melissa Bourgeois.
And by me, definitely not a lawyer, Cody Dub.
And just a quick disclaimer, we like to remind our listeners that this podcast should not be taken as legal advice and it is for informational purposes only. Because everyone's relationship is different, please consult a legal professional if you have any questions.
Hi.
Hi, Cody.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited about today's conversation.
I know. I think it sounds like we're twisting things up a little bit.
We are mixing things up. We're going to do something that is very much in my wheelhouse and talk about something viral or whatever you want to call it, something very online. And as an extremely online person, this is my sweet spot.
Yeah. Well, and this is where my weaknesses come in, where I am just getting to be the adoptee of the online world. And so I've had to actually do a significant amount of homework to be able to understand where we're going with all of this. But I think I'm starting to get my head around it. And now I think I'm starting to become what we call a TikTok monster.
Yeah, no, and I love that you refer it to homework. That's what I'm going to tell my husband now when I'm like mindlessly scrolling. This is homework. So
yeah.
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
Research and development.
Exactly.
R&D. There you go. Sounds very important.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to talk about a creator on TikTok that has been popping up on my For You page quite a bit. I've seen a few of her videos now, and I wanted to talk about, I'll give you a background, an overview of kind of who she is and why she started popping up, and I assume why she is probably popping up on a lot of people's feeds. And then I wanted to just kind of dive into one or two or three of her videos that I found really compelling and why, and we can kind of talk about that. But her name is Courtney Gets Fit, and she is, I hope I'm getting the kind of synopsis right, but she's a 37-year-old stay-at-home mom, and she's got 2 kids and was recently blindsided by her husband that he wants a divorce. And so she has been kind of dealing with that. I think it's been a month maybe since this happened. And so she is doing a lot of processing, obviously. But the reason I wanted to talk about her was because she is having obviously a very intense experience, and there's so much legally there, emotionally, but I thought what was really interesting to me was her age and kind of the demographic information around it. The 2 kids, the fact that she's been out of the workforce for 10 years, and the fact that she's 37. So I think based on kind of what we do here and her age and stage in life, she's just a really interesting example of someone who had a lot of expectations about what life was going to be like, and they are completely turned on their head now, and she's not old enough for it to be a cut and dry, here's spousal till the end of time. But she's not really young enough. She's been at it for a long time. A decade is a long time to be out of the workforce. I think I came back to work when I'm turning 40 this year. I was 37 when I came back to work here. So I was uh-oh, I get it.
Yeah, you would. Yeah.
And so I just thought you could really speak to what questions she might be having. Again, we're not speaking to her in any stretch,
no.
But just as a case study, why this would be so, because my first thought was if I was a lawyer and I looked at this, I'd be ka-ching, because this is the exact gray area where it's child support is obviously going to come into play in some capacity, but the amount of time she's been out of the workforce, the fact that she is quite a young woman, she's going to need, a phase 2 here, especially as those kids continue to get older, and that's going to be really legally gray. There's no formula for here's your sacrifice, here's what you're owed, go on your merry way. That's really what lawyers do, that specific area of spousal support. How does that work? How do we transition you now into entering the workforce again? And how do we determine what that support looks like, how that support is fair, what the plan is moving forward? I think, I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And then I have a couple other videos of hers I want to chat about too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, super interesting topic. And I did watch as much as I, was capable of digesting. But, I commend her so much for the courage, because I think it's exactly these types of things that people need to be sharing their stories, and also, finding support networks wherever they can find it. And so, Courtney Gets Fit, or, Courtney, we'll call her, is really vulnerable, right? This isn't anything new, but when there is a financial imbalance in any kind of relationship, doesn't matter whether it's spousal or otherwise, that one, you know, has a little bit of what we kind of view to be like less power in decision making, right? And when it's upended this way, where particularly this was not her choice, this was not the outcome she wanted, then, you know, you really are. I mean, the first video, I think the one that went viral is just this woman in a pure state of shock, right? And I think that's what touched so many people, is like, oh, yeah, what do you do from here, right? She mentioned, I don't even have a credit card in my name. I've been using it. And he just came home and told me I'm done with that credit card. And I watched another one where she was like, this car is not even in my name. And so it's been this like really interesting thing to watch her unfold and come to terms with. All of a sudden, you know, her whole life is going to change, but also her role, not even just within her family and her home, but in society now, is going to be changing significantly.
That's a really interesting point. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting, because that was my main motivator for going back into the workforce. Was I wanted, you know, not in like such a dramatic fashion, but I wanted my role in society to change. I was ready to start having conversations that revolved around me again, and less about these children that I was keeping alive.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I mean, you know, Courtney refers to her own self, where she's just like, you know, my whole life goal, everything I worked towards, everything I wanted in life was to be a stay-at-home mom, right? And so now she is faced with she doesn't have a choice. Like, she can't double down and be like, well, I don't care what your decision is, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom, because the law does not allow that. So that's kind of, I think, that tension of where, you know, this discussion can go is, you know, what happens when I'm kind of forced to change because the law has all of these parameters around it that say that, like, I can't have this same role that I had. And whether that is, you know, stay at home, part-time work, any of those things, like, the law now has a say, because this is the way that your new relationship is going to unfold.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I guess I have a question around that, because I feel like the way you phrase that is really intelligent. Like, I mean, it could be the case that while I assume she's receiving child support, she could be a stay-at-home mom, provided that's enough. Again, I have no concept of what the financials involved are, but like, if she's receiving a bit of spousal and she is receiving a bit of child support, I don't know the kids' ages either, but let's say they're like 9 and 7.
Sounds like under 10, yeah.
Yeah. So then, like, I assume it's similar to Canada, where like they are considered children of the marriage until they're about 18. So she could be a stay-at-home mom, provided those support payments are enough for the next decade, maybe.
Well, no. Like, I mean, yes, if you know, if enough money can be flowed through child support, that one is kind of a given, right? But spousal support is so different. And, you know, when I work with our clients, especially, I'm trying to break it down where it's like, you know, the point of spousal support is never that, you know, oh, it's gonna, you remain the same and one person's just going to shuffle some money over to your home indefinitely. That's rarely ever the case, right? And it looks at a whole lot of factors. And one of the major factors that a judge will is, what is the other party doing to reach what we call economic self-sufficiency? And so that's where the lens and the scrutiny that I think where she's at right now, and likely what his lawyer is arguing, is you are capable of working. Mm-hmm. He is capable of parenting. She disagrees with how that parenting should go, but you are both capable of doing the historical role that the other one held singularly. And now that you are your own unit in your own home, you're going to have to balance both of those tensions in this way. So that, I think, you know, in terms of, yes, I mean, I'm going to base a lot of assumptions, but if this were my file in the traditional system, I'm her lawyer, I immediately, just on the facts alone, there is some spousal support that's going to be paid, and there is some child support to just get them through, right? Because I mean, she can't go get a job tomorrow. Yeah. But now, like, the most recent video that I had watched was her saying, you know, that this anger and this frustration, this hurt and this pain over the fact that the children are going to be now no longer in her care full time, which is also, I mean, I can't imagine how, you know, alienating that would feel to begin with. But also the next step is when he has the children, whatever decision maker was involved in this, I presume a judge, has stated that he has the right to get his own childcare. And she is very frustrated because she's like, I'm home and I'm available. But where that turns is that she needs needs to be available to be in the workforce. And that's, I think, the heartbreaking part, that she finds herself in this big reckoning now. And as I said, I just find so much courage in what she's saying, what a lot of people have been feeling. And it's like, so I gotta like find a career, and now I'm not gonna see my kids half the time, and my roles are not gonna be the same, and I didn't get to choose this. Like, this is not, you know, so
Yeah, that I saw that video as well, and then couldn't find it again when I sent it to you for your homework list. But I'm glad you saw that one too, because whenever I find something interesting online, I like, my immediate next move is to head to the comments and be like, who agrees with me and who thinks I'm nuts? And I found the comments on that one in particular super interesting, because they were pretty divided. You know, like a lot of people were obviously incredibly sympathetic, and kind of your gut reaction is like, that's ridiculous. You are home. You are the best provider and caregiver for your kids. But I feel like there was like one or two nestled in there, and I should have saved them because they were brilliant. And it was women who were like very, very like lovingly kind of just saying exactly what you are, like, you're going to need that time to rebuild who you're going to be now. Yeah. And my immediate thought was like, oh, these women have been through this, because it's like, you would never have that wisdom and that knowledge and the kind of loving way of saying that to someone who is obviously in crisis if you have not lived through it yourself. Because it's just like, especially the way they phrased it, like they just understood it. You know, what you want to happen is no longer an available choice. Yeah. And it's going to require a lot of transformation and a lot of discomfort for everyone involved. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, these kids are also going to have to acclimate to this new normal as well. But the forced reasoning towards doing it is like to create a new foundation that is going to be more stable than if you were not kind of looking ahead and making those kinds of plans.
Well, exactly, because I mean, you know, this is 10 years out of the workforce, but if, you know, by her logic, it's, you know, let me wait until the kids are more independent, another 5 years, that is delaying an inevitability regardless, right? And so that's the part of the rebuild. And, you know, again, her whole account is about transformation. You know, she recently lost 100 pounds, so like, that's where she started from. So I have no concerns that she's going to transform into this like wonderful butterfly, right? But the point that, you know, I'm making is that, yeah, the spousal support, of course, there's, you know, in Canada, at least, we have two forms. It's compensatory, so to compensate one for the roles and, you know, the disruptions in their careers and different things because they held that role. And then there's the other one, non-compensatory, just pure financial need. Like, I have $0, I have 0 bank accounts, I have 0 anything, right? So that part for her, like, I'm sure right now there's money flowing because it seems like she's remained in the family home. And, you know, there is some form of compensation that I think, you know, no lawyer would have ill-advised either one of them on that, right? But now she's in a vacuum where it's just like, okay, so I've got some income and I can pay the bills and I can, you know, but now there's the parenting side that is changing. And then this is the moment where it's like, okay, well, where do you pivot and where do you go from here, right? And I think like this is where she finds herself, and I would, and anybody would, where you're just like, who am I? What am I capable of? Right? And then as the story unfolds, you know, beyond the shock of the first viral one and whatnot, like, you know, you see her coming to that it's just like, no, actually, I was a teacher before this. You know, I have a real estate license that I got. So she's got some options. But again, from going from your day to day being so predictable and understanding, because she does have other videos where she's like, every day is the same day for me. So, you know, there was kind of some searching before any of this happened. But now she's in this phase where nobody would envy that position where you're like, figure it all out, hey, and who do you want to be? Yeah. And that's a really tough one, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you know, again, like, I know my situation is not exactly the same, or probably even.
There's parallels for sure.
There are parallels. Yeah. And I think, like, you know, I had a lot of frustration when I was getting my kids who had never been in a daycare into daycare, figuring out that drop off, and then getting myself into the shower to get into an office. To look like I belonged in an office, and just watching my husband, who just got to do the exact same thing that he's been doing since he started doing it at like 23 years old. And they're like, again, you know, he was involved in the daycare. There was absolutely changes to our lives, but like the amount of mental and physical and emotional work that I had to do to make this transition was enormous. Yeah. And we were doing it together as a team. And I think that's kind of, again, what I wanted to talk to you about that is really interesting is like, I wanted to go back to what you were talking about between compensatory spousal support and then like financial needs spousal support, because I think that's really interesting, and a distinction that, like, you know, for our clients at least, like, it doesn't well, maybe it does come in often enough, but how does that blend work? Like, let's say
That's
hypothetically she is,
Yeah.
well, you love a loaded question.
Yeah, I do actually.
And I love a loaded burrito. So like, you know.
Yeah.
But if she was your client, or if we had a client who was in her situation where there is both financial need, she's at a tender age, you know, let's call it 37, 40. She's at an age where it's like, you got to work, but you haven't worked. And you're entering into a workforce now with, just like me, a decade missing on your work history. How does that blend work in your legal brain? Like, are you like, okay, let's take care of the basics. Like, we have the child support here. We know what's coming in for the children. How do we, how do the basics interplay with that? If you know, like if you have a rough, obviously I'm basing this on what we would do here, which is we would get a budget. We would understand what needs to be covered, what monthly needs to happen, how much of the child support is taking care of that. And then is that how you determine the financial need in terms of spousal?
Usually, yes. In Canada, we have spousal support advisory guidelines. So they're very similar to what the child support guidelines are, but they are advisory only. Child support is just the number spits out, and that is what it is based on your incomes. But spousal has a range. So there will be 3 different ranges that come up, and where that amount lands oftentimes in our process is very practical. It's, you know, we are really trying to weigh the balance between what capital is available to these people and then how they can distribute that between their 2 homes so that they can provide their children equalized standards of living. And that is a very important distinction that I do want to share, is that there is a misnomer out there that people are like, I deserve to have the same lifestyle that I had before we got separated. And it's like, that is literally an impossibility.
Yeah.
So equalized standards is not an impossibility. Equalized standards is what the law kind of is trying to move people towards. So practically speaking, like if we were representing just one, so Courtney came into our office and she's like, as a lawyer, first thing that you would do is just look at those guidelines, look at her budget, and whether, you know, her husband agrees or a judge would decide, you pitch that and you're like, well, she needs $2,500 for spousal support in addition to the child support in order to meet her needs. Now, very discretionary in terms of what a need is. And so a judge will look at your budget and be like, do you really need a $1,500 vacation fund when you're going through, you know? So that's the piece of like all of that, and where a lot of people end up going wrong, or lawyers overpromise and it's like, I'm going to get you like the highest amount of spousal support and I'm going to blah, 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 because they're forgetting that the other person also has a side. So they're like, all your side, you're going to have all the money, you're going to have all of the things. And oftentimes it's like, well, no, that's conflated. And so the judge, the best they can do to start things off is just like, let's make sure we're covering off the basics here for both of you. And then after that, we've got to dive into how long it's going to go, which is tricky even in our process with people who are amicably minded. But it's just how much is appropriate and for how long, right? And then that's where the compensatory starts to go in, like where you're like, well, I mean, if I go and I get this certification, I will make this much money in 3 years. So are you going to help me pay for that? Or, you know, so that's where the compensatory gets built on top.
Yeah. I probably struggle with compensatory in the exact same way that anyone listening to this would, where like my brain hears
Lawyers
compensatory.
do too.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, I had 3 kids. I'm owed a unicorn and $1 million every year, you know, like, and whatever it takes to get this body back to pre-baby. But when you talk about compensatory, because you had mentioned, and again, I have no idea if this is accurate because I didn't see those videos. Possibly she was a teacher, possibly she's going to be a real estate agent. When we're working with our clients, because so much of our approach is problem solving and plan building and future planning and working together, and you're a team, and how are we going to get everybody to a point where they're successful and functioning and feeling good and the kids are taken care of. And for us, we come back to that re-education piece, exactly like you mentioned, like, okay, this is, you know, not ideal, or this is a transformational time. Like where do you want to end up at the end of this transformation? Like, where are we going? And then we kind of build back that way. So the re-education piece, exactly like you said, is like, are you going back to do some coursework? And then when you complete this coursework in the field that you hope to be working in, here's where you kind of hope to end up income-wise. And that really takes the bite out of compensatory, because the other party, whether it's the husband or the wife, can see that and be like, okay, there's a plan. Like the plan is not just like, you will pay spousal for the rest of your life and like, good luck, you know? And I think that really removes a lot of the tension and the, like the fear and the anxiety when we're having these compensatory spousal conversations. But how do you reconcile with, say, someone who would be like me, who hears compensatory and is like, there will never be enough compensation for pushing those babies out?
Well, and fair enough, because sometimes, you know, the outcome of the choices that were made during that relationship do have an unweighted like outcome for those people, right? Sometimes what's difficult is oftentimes I will have one spouse who's like, no matter the efforts that I make, no matter how much education I get from here, no matter whatever, my spouse has had 20 years of advancing their career in the marketplace that my invisible labor that is not yet recognized as for what it is, which is so important to everyone involved. But you can't put that on a resume. Like you can't put, like there is this thing with like mothers being able to spin multiple plates all at once, right? But that's not a marketable skill. And so Courtney's a little bit in the timing of it because she's still got her 40s, 50s, 60s. But if we're more close to the 50s and you're just like, well, if I'm retiring in 10 years, I'm not going to earn $200,000 more per year the way that you are. So that's where it really becomes complicated. And, again, here in Canada, judges are always building law on spousal support while they're just asked these major questions. But every family is very different. And what you consider compensation is maybe not the same as what the next person needs in terms of that. So, I think that it's good to kind of remind people that, no matter what, spousal support is not a career. And it's not a job, and it will not provide you the security that you think it will, because you are still then beholden to that other person's decision making. So that person decides they're going to retire early. That person decides that they are going to change jobs. That person decides all of these things.
That person gets sick.
That's the piece, right?
Yeah.
So again, like this is where I'm so eager to watch her story unfold, because I'm just like, okay, this is going to be a rising of like, oh, I thought there was someone else that was going to, quote, take care of me. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, oh, there is huge risks involved in believing that truth rather than being like, I got to take care of me, and not in a selfish way and not in a self-help way, but like I have to make sure that I have at least some form of agency in my own day-to-day, right?
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know if I'm touching on that, but like spousal support, like again, just so complicated and so mired that even what you would consider appropriate compensatory support, so maybe you would get hundreds of thousands of dollars more in a property settlement or something like that, is really just a matter of like, we can't pin that. How do we figure that out?
Yeah, and I think it comes back to what was so interesting to me about her initially was just her age, because it was the exact age I re-entered the workforce. And it's a real mind meld, because in some ways, like just to make this more about me, I am turning 40 in a couple months, and so many people have been like, oh, like, how do you feel about it? And in a lot of ways, I feel like I took a literal decade out of time and space to have these 3 kids, and I'm very new in some ways at my career, though I've been in sales before. It's a totally different feeling from, say, my husband, who had his 40th birthday 3 years ago, where he was like, oh, I've been doing my job for like 20 years. I feel like a dinosaur. I feel like I'm ready for something different, but it's not going to come from my career. It's not going to come from my family. Our kids are very young. I'm not going to buy a fancy car, thank God. But it's an interesting feeling to feel so new at something that I should have been doing for quite some time. And I just I see the same kind of tension almost, or like curiosity maybe, because she's a bright woman, I do think you're right. I think this is really going to be a scenario where she is a phoenix rising, where now that the choice was not yours, but that like you're presented with this,
what you do with it.
Yeah, she's one of the ones where I'm like, you're going to rise to this occasion. Like you're going to do it. And again, like going back to just the comments that people have been leaving, it's interesting. Like you can kind of clock the women who have been presented with the same kind of like fulcrum turning point in their lives. And we're like, but the other side is this whole awakening, is this whole journey, is this whole thing. And it's deeply, deeply interesting to me.
Well, for sure. And it, again, now that I'm becoming my own TikTok monster and, have been watching other, stories unfold, there's such a big difference because, I can key on it because I know exactly where they're at in the legal process. And, so there's much frustration out there. Like, let me tell you the truth about family court, or let me tell you the truth about, all of these things. But one of the key differences is don't resist it. Like it is happening. And if you think you're going to fight it and you're like, you know what, I'm not going to work and I'm going to parent these kids like full time and that's it and whatever, the inevitable is going to happen. And that's what I would remind my clients in more of the traditional setting, where I was just, you know, because I would have Courtney's as my own client who were like, no, this can't be happening. It's not good for my kids. I do not agree. They need their mom. They need me to be able to be picking them up, and they need this, 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 this. And unfortunately, my role would often be to deliver the truth, which is we can try to postpone the inevitable, but without due reason these days. So the court or the law is looking at parity of parenting. And so whether you think that your co-parent is capable of parenting in the same way that you are, that's not an objective analysis. And so if there's no good reason why you should be, you know, and that's good reasons to you might be, well, historically the kids don't know any different than having me at home and having me be their primary parent and whatnot. And then the judge is like, well, legal separation's not like that. So you're going to share parenting. You could delay it. Absolutely. You've got a good lawyer. You've got lots of money. You've got, you know, you can fight things. You can bring up, you know, you need some therapeutic intervention. You need a bunch of analyses. But overall, I say, like, even inmates who are in prison have access to their children in that way. And if there's, you know, if dad has to re-coordinate his whole schedule, and I think that's where she's finding herself, where she's like, like, you couldn't figure this out while we were together, but now you can figure this out. But I don't think it's great for them to have a nanny after school and whatever. You don't have that choice, right? Because he has the exact same rights that you do to parent the children that you share.
Yeah, and we also have to caveat all of this that, like, we are literally only getting her side of the story, such is the nature of social media. But, like, she's never once been like, oh, he's not going to see these kids or, like, whatever. Like, she is very accepting and understanding that they are starting from a place of, exactly like you said, parity of parenting. Like, these children, they need their father and they will see their father, and we will co-parent together. And already, I know this must be so overwhelming for her, but I'm blown away by how she gets that in a way that is like, her initial instinct wasn't to, like, punish him or fight it or be like, they will be with me 100% of the time. Because exactly like you said, there doesn't seem to be a reason why. Like, he's not abandoning. Just because he works doesn't mean that you know, he can't figure out a week on, week off. But I think what's really hard is, it's different when two people have been both employed and have been working and sorting it out and whatnot. That division of labor, probably still imbalanced in some ways, depending. But overall, it's like, okay, well, yeah, like, you're going to pick up at this time and I'm going to arrange for them after school and all of these things. But with these particular situations where it's been, I'm the primary person, I'm there every day, they're constant, all of those, I do understand that feeling of resistance to change and being like, I firmly do not believe that this is best for them. This is not in the best interest of our kids, because the two of us decided this was what was best for them. And now you've just changed the script, you've changed the rules, and I need to adjust to it, right? So again, that's your values, where you're like, but what happens to them if I put them in daycare and I'm not the one making their lunches? Like, all of those concerns. It is a really interesting thing too, because, like, I'm, again, to liken it to my own situation, I feel, because no choice was thrust on me, but I was very aware that my children were going to grow up, and that, like, you know, especially my youngest, she's in kindergarten right now, which is half day here in Alberta, but next year she will be in full day school. All three of my little children will be in school from 8:30 to 3:20, which I know is not ideal working hours for either of us, but we're making it work. And I was very aware of that. And I feel like when I'm talking to our clients who are in this position, and we have many clients who are in this exact position, you know, someone is transitioning out of a primary parenting role into a shared parenting arrangement, re-entering the workforce, something you think would be impossible for amicable couples, and yet we have tons of them. A lot of the conversations I'm having with them are around that very immediate, like, if I'm not there, and I'm always like, I know, but you're like a year, 2 years away from those kids not really wanting you to be their primary all the time. They're going to be in sports, they're going to be, you know, and I get it, like, it's a lot of driving, but, like, emotionally, the pull is going to happen sooner than you think. I know, which is going to free you up to have that kind of psychological, emotional, and mental capacity for something that is more about you and more about where you're going and what you want your life to look like, because they are going to start forging their identities outside of you as well. And I just think, you know, when I'm working with clients, they're in such an acute state of, like, shock and stress and transition, that, like, that gentle reminder that that's going to come sooner than they think. And it helps them, for for me, I knew because I was such a anxious, hands-on mommy that it was helpful for me to do a lot of that work to give them the opportunity for that independence. Otherwise, I was just gonna snuff out their little identities.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I was gonna say that, like, it's lovely that you're able to kind of help guide them from your own lived experience and different things. And a lot of what this is also their core identity. Like, it's, it's not just like, where am I going to start working? It's like, what do I want to be when I grow up in this next stage of me, right? And if your core identity has been like, I am this incredible mom who can spin 1,200 plates in one day, make sure the house is clean, all of those things, and then all of a sudden that's just stripped away from you. Like, rarely do any of us have experiences like that, right? Because it's just like, most of the time we're like, okay, I don't like my job. Well, I'm not going to immediately just quit my job though. I'm going to look for another one. I'm going to take my time and I'm going to kind of sort out. But that's maybe the only decision you're making at that point in time, which is still a huge one. But in this case, in Courtney's case, it's like, who are you? What are you going to be? There might be some things like judges will say, like, I will set an income that I think is appropriate for you, a benchmark for you to meet, right? And if you don't meet that, and who's to say what you're capable of? It's hard enough to be applying for jobs when you're the most qualified person in the room, right? Not the one begging to be just given a chance to prove that you have these skills or that you can learn them on the job. And I don't know how many people with young children really could undertake an undergraduate degree of some sort to get themselves, so there's all of these pieces, and it is your identity as well, where it's just like, well, if I'm not this, if society or the people around me don't see me as this, what am I then? And like, I mean, hats off to everybody going through those things, right? It's like, it's a major part of this whole thing, this identity shift. And so, again, I think that's where the fun part's going to come. Like, a year from now, we'll be like, oh, that's who Courtney is, right? Like, Courtney gets healed. Courtney gets to figure out who she is, and Courtney gets to take care of Courtney. And I think if there's one piece that I've just heard over and over, her reckoning that she really believed the path that she had chosen for her was setting herself up to be taken care of. Mm-hmm. And, there's no harm in that, in believing that our spouse should be helping, taking care of us in some ways, but not all parts of us, right? Mm-hmm. Not our satisfaction, our happiness. All of these kinds of things are actually things that we need to take care of for ourselves. And then our spouse, our partner, they're just an addition to that. But that's a lot of weighted responsibility to place on someone else, right? And so I think that's where she's coming from. She's like, well, that backfired real fast, right? I willfully just, let him take care of how do I know the password to my bank account? Those types of things, right? And now she's being forced to grow up really, really fast in all of those things and to be able to take care of herself. So I can imagine just how overwhelming it is. And we're not the only ones. I think, what did she say, 9 million people or something watched her video? Like, it's a lot of millions of people out there who are just like, 14. Okay, yes, babe. Like, we, as you said, half of us understand you, half of us have been you, or whoa, like, where's this going to go?
Yeah, and I think it resonates with so many people too, because like, I found myself in her exact position in my marriage. We weren't ending our marriage, but you hit on something like really that really resonated, at least for me, is like, it exactly was that. Like, I think I kind of clued in on how big the burden was to be the sole breadwinner in our family. And, I'm taking a small chunk of that out, but I hope to take more eventually. But it's a lot of responsibility. Like, we talk about these things kind of cavalierly, to be like, okay, I got the kids, they're good. You take the house and the expenses. But if you don't, exactly like you said, if you don't understand what that means, and as soon as I started to be like, what does that mean? How do our investments work? Do we have investments? We did not. We do now. But like, what are the passwords? And how does that work? And how do I get into this? Like, just as soon as I opened my eyes, I was like, that's a lot.
Yeah, I remember
of work.
You talking about it, and how his relief, like, you could just feel that he was like, oh, I don't have to bear this all on my own
his
anymore.
Shoulders like visibly lowered, and it opened up so much for us both. And at the same time, like, it's not like I was like, I'll take this and you take nothing. No. He dug into the kid stuff. He was like, exactly. Okay, I was gonna say let's figure this stuff out. And it wasn't even so much as like we diminished the work that had to be done, because it's always the same work that has to be done, but we really like moved around who was doing it, who might enjoy it, And we stopped doing the kind of thing that I think it happens to couples exactly in our age and stage, which is where we just head in the sanded. We just weren't looking at a lot of things. And once we started looking at them and being like, you know, and it timed out really nicely because I was getting really burnt out with a lot of the kids stuff too. And handing over bedtime to him, I work later some evenings now, and it's great. It feels like a little mini vacation where I'm like, I'm going to order dinner for myself. And the work is always there, but the way you approach it and the way you share it. And I say that, and again, I understand the, like, you know, the annoying sting of me saying it, that I did it in my marriage, but I also work with people who are doing it through their separations and they're experiencing the exact same effects. Suddenly someone rises as like really competent at all of this kind of stuff, and you just don't have that weighing on your chest anymore. You're like, oh, I don't have to do the research about, you know, the sports or that kind of thing. Like, they're planning the extracurriculars. I never thought that would happen.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, it's just, you know, if there's anything to kind of like wrap all of that up, which is, you know, marriages, relationships, the point is that interdependence, that like, you know, not codependence, but interdependence. I can rely on you for this. You're really great at that and whatnot. It extends to co-parents. They're doing a brilliant job at all of it. But really what Courtney's story to me, what I really concluded was she was, and I use the word victim, but like I don't necessarily mean like the victim of Disneyfication and, well, the happily ever after, right? And, you know, when you watch these things, it is the knight that comes and sweeps you off your feet, takes you away from your family and into a castle. And nobody's telling the storyline of what happens when you're in that castle. And maybe you feel really isolated and all of it, you know, and all of it is his. But that's the narrative that I think her generation, my generation for sure, was like, someone's going to take care of me and I'm going to have this wonderful life. And with that, though, comes so many other vulnerabilities that I think, you know, again, this is where we're moving forward, where it's like, you can parent, I can parent. You can have work, I can have work, because that makes us whole and complete individuals. But I think, you know, that's what she said. It was very much like, I was looking for a man to take care of me. This one was older than her and probably more established and whatnot. So then she placed her life as his life. Right. Yeah. So I think those roles are now more and more becoming a thing where you're just like, okay, like if this is a choice that we're making, let's make sure that the impacts on both of us for that choice are the same. Right.
Yeah, I think you just like absolutely nailed it, because I can imagine of those 14 million people who watched those videos, there's quite a few people who are not yet married or who are looking at that and being like, oh, how do I make this choice about my future relationship? And you just like crushed it with, it is interdependence, not codependence. And if you're building towards interdependence and you have a successfully interdependent marriage, not a codependent marriage or relationship, or not even marriage but partnership, like that's the magic sauce.
Yep, that's the whole balance.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Separate Together.
If you like what you hear or think someone else might, please rate and review us and tell your friends to tune in. You can find us at onefamily.law.